The impossible mission. The cold metal floor beneath Commander Jack Carter's feet sent a chill up his spine. The room was massive, its high ceiling covered in glowing blue lights. Around him stood dozens of aliens, their tall, thin bodies covered in dark robes. Their yellow, glowing eyes stared at him with mocking amusement. Jack's hands were tied behind his back, his face bruised from earlier beatings. But he didn't show pain. He didn't show fear. He stood tall, his eyes locked on the alien leader in front of him, High Commander Xyrock of the Sci-Fi Empire. Xyrock stepped forward, his long fingers tapping against his metallic armor. His thin lips curled into a smirk. "Human." Xyrock's voice was deep, filled with arrogance. "Do you know why you are here?" Jack remained silent. He knew anything he said would be useless. "Your kind is weak," Xyrock continued. "You are nothing but insects. You fight, you struggle, but in the end, you break." The other aliens chuckled, their laughter echoing through the chamber. Jack clenched his jaw, but said nothing. Xyrock turned, pressing a button on the table in front of him. A holographic screen flickered to life, showing a dark planet. Thick jungles, towering trees, and rivers of molten lava filled the screen. The sky was a deep blood-red color. Then, the image zoomed in. A massive beast appeared on the screen, covered in black scales and glowing red eyes. Its fangs were as long as swords, its claws sharp enough to slice through steel. It let out a deafening roar, shaking the entire screen. Jack felt his stomach tighten. He had never seen a creature like this before. "This is the apex beast," Xyrock said, his voice filled with amusement. "The most dangerous predator in the galaxy. No one survives on its planet. No one." The other aliens grinned. They already knew what was coming next. Xyrock leaned forward. "We are sending you there." The room fell silent. No weapons, no armor, no food, nothing. Xyrock smirked. "Survive, and you are free." Laughter erupted around the room. They were enjoying this. To them, this was not a test. It was a death sentence. Jack felt his heartbeat slow. He had been in impossible situations before. But this was something else. Still, he refused to show fear. Xyrock stepped closer, looking Jack directly in the eye. "You will die screaming," he whispered, "like the others before you." Jack stared back. "We'll see." The drop. The last thing Jack remembered was being dragged to a metal pod. His hands were untied, but the guards shoved him inside before he could react. The door slammed shut. A robotic voice echoed inside the pod. Preparing for launch. Jack barely had time to brace himself before. Boom. The pod shot forward, the sudden force pressing him against the walls. The blue lights flickered as the ship hurtled through space, heading toward the death planet. Through the small window, Jack saw the blood-red sky growing larger. The robotic voice spoke again, entering atmosphere in 10 seconds. Jack clenched his fists. He had no weapons, no plan. He needed to think fast. 5 seconds. He exhaled slowly. He had to focus. He had to survive. 3, 2, 1. The pod exploded open midair, sending Jack plummeting toward the jungle below. The wind roared in his ears. He angled his body, trying to control his descent. The ground rushed toward him. Fast. Too fast. Crash. Jack slammed through thick tree branches, flipping and rolling before hitting the muddy ground. Silence. For a moment, he didn't move. Pain shot through his body, but nothing was broken. He was alive. He slowly pushed himself up. The jungle around him was massive. The trees stretched high into the blood-red sky, their leaves glowing in the dark. The air was thick with moisture, and strange, glowing plants pulsed with light. Then he noticed something else. It was too quiet. Jack's instincts screamed danger. The first signs of the beast. A low, guttural growl rumbled through the jungle. Jack's breath caught in his throat. Slowly, he turned his head. Between the trees, two glowing red eyes stared at him. A massive shadow shifted in the darkness, its enormous body barely visible through the thick jungle. Jack's heartbeat pounded. He stayed completely still. Then, crack! A branch snapped beneath his boot. The eyes narrowed. The growl grew deeper. Jack knew what was coming. The creature charged. The monster in the dark. Jack Carter ran. His boots pounded against the damp jungle floor, his breath sharp and fast. Behind him, the apex beast thundered forward, its heavy footsteps shaking the earth. Trees splintered as its massive body crashed through the jungle, tearing through vines and crushing anything in its path. Jack's mind raced. No weapons, no armor, no way off this planet. Just him and a creature designed to kill. The growl behind him deepened, then turned into a terrifying roar. The force of the sound hit Jack like a shockwave, rattling his bones. It wasn't just a roar, it was a warning. "You are mine," the beast's growl seemed to say. Jack darted between two thick trees, his body slick with sweat, his lungs burning. He needed a plan. Running wouldn't save him forever. He needed to think. He needed to. A shadow moved to his left. Jack's instincts screamed, and he dove forward just as a giant, clawed limb swiped through the air where his head had been. He rolled across the ground and came up fast, his fists clenched, his body ready for the next attack. But the beast didn't strike again. It stood there, massive and monstrous, its black scales gleaming in the red glow of the jungle. Its muscles rippled beneath its thick hide, each movement precise and deliberate. It wasn't rushing anymore. It was watching, studying him. Jack's breath slowed. He had been hunted before. He had fought enemies twice his size. But this wasn't just a beast. This was a predator, a killer, a king of its world. And Jack was just another creature in its jungle. But then, why wasn't it attacking? A dangerous game of survival. Jack took a slow step backward, his boots crunching softly against the damp earth. The beast tilted its head, its glowing red eyes locked onto him. He could feel its breath, hot, slow, steady. It wasn't killing him yet. Maybe it was waiting. Maybe it was playing with him. Jack's mind clicked into survival mode. He took in his surroundings, the thick trees, the sharp rocks, the roots weaving through the dirt. He needed an advantage. His eyes landed on a tall tree with thick branches, its surface covered in sharp, vine-like spikes. A perfect obstacle. If he couldn't fight the beast, he had to outthink it. Jack darted toward the tree. The apex beast reacted instantly. A deep snarl. A burst of speed. It lunged forward. Jack leaped, gripping the lowest branch and swinging himself up. He moved fast, climbing higher, using the spikes as footholds. The tree was dense enough to slow the beast, but it wouldn't stop it forever. The ground shook violently as the beast slammed into the tree. The entire trunk trembled, but it held. Jack kept climbing. Higher. Faster. The red sky of the jungle peered through the leaves above. Below, the apex beast growled, its massive claws scraping against the bark. It tried to climb, but its size worked against it. The spikes on the tree dug into its thick hide, making it snarl in frustration. Jack finally reached a high branch and looked down. For the first time since landing on this cursed planet, he wasn't running anymore. A predator's patience. Jack sat on the thickest branch, catching his breath. The apex beast paced below, watching him. It wasn't leaving. Jack's stomach twisted. He had seen this behavior before, in wolves, in big cats. This wasn't a failed hunt. This was patience. It was waiting for him to come down. Jack exhaled sharply. He couldn't stay up here forever. He needed a real plan. His thoughts stopped when he noticed something. The apex beast's leg. A wound. A deep, clawed gash just above its knee. Jack's mind raced. This creature was the ultimate predator. It should have been unstoppable. So why was it injured? More importantly, what could injure something like this? The unseen danger. A distant sound echoed through the jungle. A deep, clicking noise. Low, hollow, rhythmic. Jack's instincts tensed. That sound, it wasn't coming from the apex beast. The creature's ears flicked slightly. It heard it too. Jack's pulse quickened. If this thing is the top predator here, then what the hell is it afraid of? Then, suddenly, the jungle fell silent. Jack didn't move. The apex beast stopped pacing. Its muscles tensed, its nostrils flared. Something was out there. Something worse. The clicking sound grew louder, closer. Jack's fingers tightened against the bark. Whatever was coming, even the apex beast was wary of it. The unthinkable happens. The jungle held its breath. Jack Carter didn't move. The apex beast below him remained still, its massive body coiled like a spring, muscles tense and ready. Its red eyes flicked toward the darkness beyond the trees. It had gone from hunter to something else. Prey. Jack's instincts screamed at him. Something worse was out there. The clicking sound returned. Low, rhythmic, unnatural. It didn't come from one place. It echoed, bouncing between the trees, making it impossible to tell where it was coming from. Jack scanned the jungle below. Thick vines twisted around giant roots. The air was heavy still. He could feel it. A shift in the atmosphere. The apex beast snarled. It lowered its head slightly, its nostrils flaring, its claws flexing against the dirt. Ready. Jack had spent enough time on battlefields to recognize a warrior's stance. It was preparing for a fight. But against what? A second predator appears. The jungle erupted. From the shadows, something lunged forward. Fast, too fast. Jack barely caught a glimpse, a blur of armored skin, long, jagged limbs, and a glistening mouth filled with serrated teeth. It was almost the same size as the apex beast, but thinner, built for speed and precision. The apex beast reacted instantly. It roared, charging forward, its claws ripping through the dirt. The two titans collided in an explosion of power, slamming into a tree so hard that the entire ground shook beneath Jack's feet. Jack gripped the branch tighter, eyes locked on the battle below. The apex beast fought with pure force. It swung its massive claws, each strike capable of breaking bones and crushing skulls. But the other creature, Jack didn't even have a name for it, was fast. Too fast. It ducked, weaved, twisted between attacks, its razor-sharp limbs slicing at the apex beast's hide. The fight was brutal, savage. For the first time, Jack saw the apex beast struggle. The dark creature hissed, its teeth snapping inches from the apex beast's throat. It was playing with it, testing its weaknesses. Jack's heart pounded. If this thing could kill the apex beast, what chance did he have? The apex beast's struggle. Blood splattered against the jungle floor. The apex beast let out a deep guttural snarl, one of its front legs buckling slightly. The previous wound on its leg, the one Jack had noticed earlier, was slowing it down. Jack clenched his fists. It wasn't just fighting a rival predator. It was fighting injured. The dark creature sensed weakness. It darted in, striking low, its claws slicing across the apex beast's side. The apex beast staggered. The jungle fell silent for half a second. Then, the dark creature pounced. Jack saw it. The opening. The final attack. He didn't think. He just moved. The impossible choice. Jack launched himself from the tree. He hit the ground hard, rolling into a crouch. He was already moving, already reaching. His hands found what he was looking for, a jagged piece of bone from some long-dead creature. A weapon, primitive, but sharp enough to kill. The dark creature was already midair, its claws outstretched, its jaws open, aimed for the apex beast's throat. Jack threw the bone with all his strength. The sharp edge sank into the creature's side. It wasn't deep enough to kill, but it was enough. The creature screeched, twisting in midair, its body jerking from the unexpected attack. Instead of landing a killing bite, it barely grazed the apex beast's throat. The apex beast didn't waste the moment. It lunged, its massive jaws snapping shut around the creature's midsection. There was a sickening crunch. The dark predator let out one final, horrible scream, and then fell limp. Silence. Jack's chest heaved. He could barely process what just happened. He had saved the apex beast, and now it was staring at him. A new kind of understanding. Jack tensed. This was the moment. Would it attack him? Would it see him as a threat now? The apex beast took a step forward. Its giant shadow loomed over Jack, its glowing red eyes locked onto his. Jack didn't move. The apex beast's nostrils flared. It could smell his scent now. It let out a low, deep rumble, not a growl. Something else. It tilted its head slightly. Jack had seen animals do this before. Not predators sizing up prey. Companions recognizing each other. Allies. Jack let out a slow breath. He wasn't dead. The apex beast took another step forward, then sat. It just sat there, watching him, waiting. Jack's heart pounded. He knew what this was. He had earned its respect. The bond between man and monster. The jungle was silent once more. Jack Carter stood motionless, staring into the glowing red eyes of the apex beast. The air between them was thick with tension, the scent of blood still fresh from the battle. Just minutes ago, Jack had saved this creature's life. And now, it wasn't leaving. The apex beast's massive form remained still, its breath slow and controlled. It didn't snarl. It didn't attack. It just watched. Jack took a cautious step back, his muscles tense, ready to run if he had to. The beast's eyes followed him, its head tilting slightly. Then, it took a step forward. Jack's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't charging. It wasn't growling. It was following him. Something had changed. Something impossible. A test of trust. Jack knew he was in uncharted territory. This wasn't just an animal. The apex beast was more than just a mindless killer. It was a creature of instinct, dominance, and survival. Jack had seen this behavior before, not in monsters, but in wolves. In lions. It wasn't looking at him like prey anymore. Jack slowly lifted his hands. No sudden movements. The apex beast's nostrils flared, its head lowering slightly. Jack realized something. It was waiting for his next move. A deep guttural rumble vibrated from the beast's chest. Not a growl of aggression. It was something else. Jack swallowed hard. He took another slow step back. The apex beast matched his movement. Jack stopped. So did the beast. A quiet moment passed. Then, acting purely on instinct, Jack did something crazy. He took a step forward. The apex beast's eyes locked onto him, muscles tensing. Then, it lowered its head slightly. Submission. Jack's pulse thundered in his ears. This was it. Somehow, some way, he had gained its trust. The first interaction. Jack slowly extended a hand. His fingers were still coated in dirt, scratches covering his skin. The apex beast didn't move at first. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, it leaned its massive head closer. Jack felt its breath. Hot, heavy, primal. The creature sniffed once, twice. Then, to Jack's absolute shock, it bumped its head against his palm. Jack froze. The apex beast let out a low, rumbling sound deep in its throat. Jack knew what this was. A test. A test of trust. He didn't pull back. He didn't show fear. Instead, he pressed his hand against the beast's rough, armored hide. It didn't flinch. Instead, it exhaled deeply, almost like Relief. Jack's chest tightened. This thing had never been shown kindness. It had only ever fought, killed, survived. And now, it was choosing to trust him, learning the beast's ways. For the next few hours, Jack followed the apex beast through the jungle. Or maybe, it was following him. It stayed close, but not too close. Always within sight, always watching. Jack used this time to study it. It moved with precision. Every step was calculated, avoiding the sharp vines that littered the jungle floor. It had intelligence. It sniffed the air before approaching certain areas, clearly sensing danger before Jack could. It wasn't just a killer. It was a survivor, a warrior. Jack began mimicking its movements. When the beast crouched low, Jack did the same. When it listened, Jack held his breath, focusing. Slowly, a rhythm formed. The beast wasn't just tolerating him anymore. It was teaching him, protecting each other. Hours passed. The jungle darkened. Jack knew he needed shelter, and surprisingly, the apex beast led him to it. A cave, hidden behind thick vines. Jack hesitated at the entrance, but the beast walked inside first, its massive frame barely squeezing through. It sniffed the air, checking for threats. Then, it simply laid down. Jack let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. It wasn't just staying with him. It was protecting him. That night, for the first time since landing on this planet, Jack didn't feel alone. The aliens are watching. Meanwhile, far above the planet, aboard the Sci-Fi mothership, a group of aliens stared at a holographic screen in complete silence. What they were seeing was impossible. A human. A creature meant to die. Not only alive, but walking beside the apex beast. One of the officers turned to High Commander Xyrock. "Sir, should we intervene?" Xyrock's eyes narrowed, his fingers tapping against the metallic console. No, his voice was unreadable. Let's see how far this goes. But deep inside, a whisper of fear crept into his mind. If one human could do this, what else were they capable of? The impossible return. Jack Carter never imagined he'd live this long. Not on this planet. Not after being thrown into a jungle with no weapons, no food, and no hope. But now he sat inside a hidden cave, his back against the cold rock wall. His body ached, his cuts stung, but he was still breathing. And beside him, curled up like a sleeping titan, was the very thing that was supposed to kill him. The apex beast. Jack ran a hand through his sweat-matted hair. The situation was insane. Unbelievable. The aliens had sent him here to die. Instead, he had tamed the deadliest predator in the galaxy. And he wasn't done yet. He was getting off this planet. And when he did, the aliens wouldn't be laughing anymore. Planning the impossible, Jack spent the next few days learning everything about his new companion. The apex beast, which he had started calling Titan, wasn't just powerful. It was smart. It watched him, copied him, learned from him. Jack tested this theory by teaching it basic hand signals. A raised hand. Stop. A fist. Stay low. A wave. Follow. To his shock, Titan obeyed. Not instantly, but it tried. This wasn't just a beast. This was a creature capable of understanding. And that meant Jack could train it. The aliens are watching. Far above the planet, aboard the Sci-Fi mothership, High Commander Xyrock watched the holographic screen in utter disbelief. Jack was alive. That was shocking enough. But now the human was sitting beside the apex beast like it was a loyal warhound. The alien officers whispered nervously, their glowing yellow eyes wide with unease. Xyrock gritted his teeth. This wasn't supposed to happen. The apex beast was supposed to rip the human apart. Instead, the two had formed a bond. One officer hesitated. "Sir, should we terminate the human now?" Xyrock's fingers tapped against the metal console. His eyes narrowed. "No," he finally said. Not yet. He wanted to see just how far this human could go. And if he truly was a threat, then Xerox would crush him personally. The first flight. Back on the planet, Jack stood at the mouth of the cave, staring up at the night sky. The stars burned bright, and somewhere above those stars, his captors were watching. Fine. Let them. Jack glanced at Titan, who stood beside him, its massive form motionless, waiting. Jack exhaled sharply. All right, big guy, time for a test run. Titan's red eyes blinked. Jack took a few cautious steps forward, then patted its thick, scaled neck. Titan grunted but didn't pull away. Jack nodded to himself. This was insane, completely suicidal. But it was also his only shot. He took a deep breath and climbed onto Titan's back. The jungle shakes. At first, Titan stiffened beneath him. Jack's grip tightened. If it threw him off, he was dead. But then, something incredible happened. Titan relaxed. Jack barely had time to process this before Titan took off. The jungle blurred around him as the massive creature charged forward, each step a thunderous quake against the earth. Jack gritted his teeth, his fingers digging into Titan's rough hide. This thing was fast. Faster than anything he had ever seen. The wind whipped against his face. The ground rushed beneath them. And then, Titan leaped. For a split second, Jack felt weightless. Then they landed, Titan's claws digging into the earth, sending dust and leaves flying in all directions. Jack let out a breathless laugh. It worked. Titan was strong enough to carry him, fast enough to outrun anything. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were unstoppable. The aliens panic. The moment Titan took its first leap, the Sci-Fi officers gasped. A holographic feed zoomed in, showing Jack riding the apex beast like a warlord. Impossible, one of them whispered. He has control over it. Xerox's jaw clenched. This was worse than he had imagined. The human wasn't just surviving. He was thriving. He turned sharply toward his second-in-command. Prepare the retrieval team. Now. They had seen enough. Jack Carter could not be allowed to leave that planet alive. The final trap. Jack knew the aliens were watching. He could feel it. That meant they would come for him soon. And when they did, he would be ready. He had spent days exploring Titan's territory. He had found something interesting. An abandoned alien dropship, half buried in the jungle. The tech inside was fried, but the distress beacon was still intact. Jack had spent hours rewiring it, slowly bringing it back to life. Now, as the signal pulsed into the sky, Jack watched the night air, waiting. It wouldn't be long now. Soon, the aliens would come. They would expect to find his corpse. Instead, they were going to find something else entirely. Jack clenched his fists. They had sent him here to die. Now he was going to make them regret it. The tables have turned. The jungle sky burned with light. Jack Carter stood at the mouth of the cave, watching as 3 alien dropships cut through the blood-red clouds above. Their sleek metallic bodies shimmered against the dark horizon, their engines roaring like thunder. They were coming for him. Good. Jack had been waiting. Beside him, Titan rumbled low, its deep red eyes locked onto the approaching ships. The apex beast was still, but its muscles were coiled like a spring, ready to pounce at a moment's notice. Jack smirked. The aliens thought they were coming to retrieve a corpse. Instead, they were about to meet something far worse. Their worst nightmare. The aliens' plan. Aboard the lead dropship, Commander Rylas adjusted his targeting visor. His claws flexed against the cold steel of his rifle, his breathing controlled. The orders had been clear. Kill the human. Retrieve the beast's body. Destroy all evidence. Simple. He had seen this same mission executed hundreds of times. Prisoners dropped onto death worlds. The weak eliminated. The strong hunted for sport. It always ended the same way. But this time, This time, something felt wrong. The holo screen flickered, showing live footage from the planet below. And there he was, the human, standing, alive, waiting, and beside him, the apex beast. Ryla's blood ran cold. This wasn't possible. The apex beast was a killer, a force of nature. It didn't accept masters. It didn't obey. And yet there it was, standing beside the human like a trained war beast. Rylas hesitated for the first time in his long career. What the hell had this human done? Jack's ambush begins. Jack counted the dropships. 3. He could work with that. The aliens would land expecting a quick extraction and execution. They wouldn't expect an attack. Jack turned to Titan. The beast's nostrils flared, sensing the battle ahead. Jack raised a fist. Wait. Titan stilled, lowering its body into a crouch. Its massive tail curled behind it, ready to launch forward at Jack's command. The first ship hovered lower, its engines kicking up dust and debris. Jack's heartbeat slowed. Wait. The landing ramp hissed open. Armed Sci-Fi soldiers in dark battle armor moved forward, their glowing rifles raised. Jack's eyes narrowed. No. Titan roared. The jungle exploded into chaos. Titan unleashes hell. Before the Sci-Fi could react, Titan launched forward like a missile. One moment, the soldiers were in formation, their rifles steady. The next, they were airborne, thrown like ragdolls as Titan barreled through them. Jack moved fast. He snatched a fallen rifle, rolling behind a nearby tree as laser fire sizzled through the air. Titan didn't stop. Claws tore through armor. Jaws snapped bones like twigs. One Sci-Fi aimed his rifle, too slow. Titan's tail whipped around, slamming into his chest with enough force to send him flying into a tree. Cracky. Jack winced. That guy wasn't getting up. More soldiers tried to regroup, shouting in their alien tongue. One turned toward the dropship, trying to retreat. Jack raised his stolen rifle and fired. The alien collapsed, smoking hole in his chest. No more running. Not this time. The war beast rises. From the lead dropship, Commander Rylas watched in horror. This wasn't an extraction. This was a slaughter. And the worst part, it wasn't just the apex beast doing the killing. The human was fighting back, with skill, with precision, with control. Rylas bared his teeth. They had underestimated him. Gravely, snarling, he grabbed his communicator. Deploy the heavy artillery. Now, the final challenge. Jack heard the metallic clank before he saw it. His stomach dropped. Reinforcements. A new wave of Sci-Fi soldiers marched from the second dropship, carrying something Jack had hoped not to see. A Titan-class war mech. The massive machine hissed and clicked, its multi-barreled plasma cannon spinning to life. Titan snarled, stepping protectively in front of Jack. The mech's pilot spoke through an amplifier, his voice cold. Human, step away from the beast, and we will make your death swift. Jack tilted his head. Then he laughed. You still don't get it, do you? He stepped forward, resting a hand on Titan's thick hide. The soldiers hesitated. The mech's cannon whirred louder. Jack smirked. This isn't just a beast. Titan roared, the force of its bellow rattling the air. This is a declaration of war, the legend of the Beastmaster. The jungle air crackled with tension. Jack Carter stood his ground, his pulse steady, his grip tightened against Titan's thick, armored hide. This was it, the final test. Above him, the Sci-Fi war mech loomed like a mechanical titan, its multi-barreled plasma cannon humming to life. Its pilot, encased in thick alien armor, raised a clawed hand. A single motion could unleash devastation. Behind the mech, the remaining Sci-Fi soldiers stood in formation, their rifles aimed at Jack. Their expressions were unreadable, but he could feel their hesitation. They had come expecting to retrieve a dead human. Instead, they had found a warrior riding the deadliest predator in the galaxy. And now, they were afraid. Good. Jack smirked. Time to make them regret ever coming here. The first strike. The war mech fired first. A blazing plasma blast tore through the jungle, vaporizing the trees where Jack had stood a second earlier. But Jack wasn't there anymore. Titan had already moved. The apex beast leaped sideways, its monstrous form surprisingly agile, dodging the attack just in time. Jack clung tightly to its back as Titan charged forward. The war mech adjusted its aim. Too slow. Titan closed the distance in seconds, claws digging into the ground. Then it jumped. A 20-foot leap straight toward the towering mech. For the first time, the alien pilot hesitated. The apex beast's massive claws tore through the metal plating, leaving deep, sparking gashes. The mech staggered, trying to shake Titan off. Jack didn't waste the opportunity. He jumped off Titan's back midair, landing onto the mech's upper plating. With precise, practiced movements, Jack grabbed a loose maintenance cable, yanked it free, and plunged his stolen blade straight into the mech's exposed circuitry. The entire machine sparked violently. Then, boom! The war mech collapsed in a heap of burning metal. Titan landed beside Jack, letting out a victorious roar that shook the trees. Jack wiped the sweat from his brow, grinning at the stunned soldiers still standing. Your turn. The aliens' fear. The Sci-Fi soldiers froze. Their commander, Rylus, took a step back, his rifle trembling in his hands. His eyes darted between the burning wreckage of the war mech and the human who had destroyed it. Impossible, he whispered. No human should have survived this planet. No human should have tamed the apex beast. No human should have defeated a war mech single-handedly. And yet here Jack stood, unbroken, unstoppable. And that was when the true fear sank in. If this one human could do this, what could an army of them do? Rylus turned sharply to his communicator. Pull back. Evacuate now. The last stand. Jack heard the order. He saw the aliens turning to flee, and he wasn't about to let that happen. Titan sensed his intent. The apex beast let out a bone-rattling roar and charged. The first alien barely had time to scream before Titan's claws struck, sending him flying. Another soldier tried to fire. Too late. Jack was already moving, rolling under a plasma blast, knocking the rifle from the alien's hands and driving his blade into its armor. Within seconds, it was over. The Sci-Fi scattered, their carefully trained formations broken. Jack stood amidst the wreckage, breathing hard. He turned, scanning the battlefield. Only one ship remained. Its engines whined as it began to lift off, carrying Commander Rylus and the last of his forces. Jack clenched his fists. He could let them go. Or he could send a message. The message to the Sci-Fi Empire. Jack climbed onto Titan's back one last time. Let's end this, big guy. Titan growled in response, its muscles tensing. Then, they ran. The remaining dropship was 50 feet off the ground when Jack gave the order. Jump. Titan launched into the air, its massive form slamming into the hull of the ship. The entire structure tilted dangerously, alarms blaring inside. Jack grabbed onto the edge of the ramp as Titan tore through the metal plating with its claws. Inside the cockpit, Rylus stared in horror. Jack met his gaze through the glass. For a long second, neither of them moved. Then Jack spoke, his voice calm but unshakable. Tell your empire, humanity is not prey. Jack jumped off the ship at the last second, landing back onto Titan's back as the massive beast pushed away from the hull. The ship, too damaged to stay in the air, spiraled out of control. It crashed into the jungle in a burst of fire. Silence. Jack exhaled. It was over. The beginning of a legend. For the first time in weeks, the jungle was quiet. Jack stood beside Titan, looking at the wreckage. He knew what would happen next. That Sci-Fi Empire would hear about this. They would come looking for answers. And when they did, they would find only one thing. The legend of a human who had defied the impossible. A human who had not only survived, but had tamed the untamable. The Beastmaster. Jack patted Titan's thick hide. The battle was over. But the war, it was just beginning. Epilogue. A new threat. Far across the galaxy, inside the Sci-Fi War Council chambers, High Commander Xerox watched the reports in silence. His officers stood nervously, awaiting his response. A single human had done this. A single human had crushed an elite squad, had tamed a monster, had won. Xerox's claws tightened against the cold steel of his throne. This was not acceptable. "Prepare the fleet," he said at last, his voice like a blade through the air. His officers hesitated. "Sir." Xerox's yellow eyes glowed with rage. "We are going back. And this time, we are bringing an army. The end, or the beginning."